listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is July 12th, actually, 2022. I was about to say 20th, we're just skipping some days here. My name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine July 12th?
Spencer, hello. I'm doing well. You're probably just confused because it's been such a whirlwind of WoW news this week that it's hard to get your bearings, so you may not know exactly when it is, but I'm doing well, man. We're really sort of this last week was the fourth to last reset of season 3, so stuff is really winding down. But man, we got so much swirling around and stuff to look forward to. So it's definitely exciting, even if live WoW itself is a little bit chilled out right now. Also, at the top, really quick, I just wanted to say a big congrats to our friends Garrett and Kyle for wrapping up into the Nexus with number 433. What a run, man. That was like 7-8 years doing a more or less weekly show about Heroes of the Storm. There's still going to be podcasting and stuff, and they're going to keep that feed up and put other stuff up there, but it's not going to be Heroes of the Storm focused anymore. Obviously, that game is shifting into maintenance mode, which we saw coming, but it's still kind of sad to see it happen. But congrats to those guys. That show was great, and it was always fun chatting with those guys at events and having them on our show and everything like that. So a little tip of the cap to them.
Yeah, it's official now. It officially moved into maintenance mode.
Yep.
It's sort of been on the horizon for a long time, but they made the announcement. So no, congrats to them. I mean, any long time running show takes a lot of work, especially if you're running it consistently. So
and a single game focus, that. Man. Like it's hard to do a single game focus.
It's very hard to do
8 years weekly basis.
Yeah. All right. But let's jump into what's going on this past week in World of Warcraft. So this past week in World of Warcraft, because since we have such a loaded show, was Raid Reclear for us. It was our first Reclear back in there. My hopeful goal was a 2-night clear. My more grounded sort of, I guess reality was the 3-night clear. We actually were very close. We got to Rygalon in 2 nights, and then didn't actually manage to snag Rygalon the second night. So then we downed him the third, and then went and killed Jailer. And so it was like 2.5, I think, is what we ended up at. It was like maybe 2 in an hour, 2 raid nights an hour, so 7-hour clear for us this past week.
I mean, it's really not bad considering the size of the place and just how long it takes to get stuff going in there.
Well,
here's the question: how many of the fights did you straight up forget how to do because you haven't done them in months?
It'd been 3 months since we did some of these fights, and obviously they had changed dramatically in that period of time as far as strategies and whatnot was. The fights that surprised us, we also had some apps in, so we also had people who were like, not only are we using archaic strategies that we are still, trying to adapt to these new tuned bosses, but we have people who've never done any of those strategies with us. So Skull X, we had some wipes on that we shouldn't have had, just from people having to learn that they have to run out and stack with the group. Basically we use callouts like, okay, lock gate now, because that's the cue for our melee group to take the lock gate back to the range and everyone to be stacked for stuff to happen. And of course our 2 apps take the lock gate out to the melee from ranged, because they heard take the lock gate now. And you're like,
right.
That would. So that happened.
And that dance is like kind of counterintuitive for somebody looking at it for the first time. The timing and sort of how you move around the room is weird if you're not used to doing it on Mythic. So that even though it's a simple fight, it could definitely trip you up.
Yeah, and then I think understandably, Anduin was hey, let's figure out what even the damage checkpoints are for this fight, because the fight just falls over in the last phase now. But getting to that last phase, there was still some missed interrupts, I think, were the biggest thing, or missed CC on ads that AoE feared everyone. That was kind of our largest wipe contributor to Anduin. And then Lahuvum, surprisingly, was a much longer prog fight for us, because we just had we were trying a different strategy for how you manage the push pull for that boss on Mythic. On Mythic, you get a debuff that pushes people away, pulls people in, and you have to group up and stack together. The strat that we initially did was 4 separate groups because the damage was high enough back when we did it initially that you needed to be in 4 separate groups, or you just killed everyone because there was just too much damage inside that one window. Whereas now the strategy is just everyone stacks together in a ball. But what this means is that ball tends to be closer to melee, and so people who are like warlocks, for example, who don't have any sort of like quick way to move around as ranged, end up getting caught outside of that ball, and so you have to have a movement speed boost for every single one of them to get everyone in. And there was just some relearning that was happening. That was probably our largest relearning boss. I thought honestly it was going to be Pantheon. Pantheon we one shot, so that was surprising to me.
Nice.
So that Lahuvum was one of the barriers for us. Outside of that, I think we had 2 or 3 wipes on Zymox. Like, that wasn't too big of a deal. That fight is still like, we kill it, but like the majority of the raid is dead because of like some tight
war
timings.
Of attrition at the end with the rings coming in. It's just like, please somebody cheese a ring to just keep a dot rolling on it.
Yeah. Knocked over Dreadlords. That was pretty easy. And then the thing that got us the most with Rygalon was the orb that you have to kill to spawn the safe zones that people run to, the safe circles that everyone has to run to.
Unstable matter, or whatever it's called.
Our DPS was just all over the place on it. We actually had one wipe where we should have killed it on night 2, where it had like 25k hit points left, and the person who was downstairs just didn't target it to hit it once, which needed to happen. Right. And it's just like people relearning the importance and the how critical that is to do. So it was a relearning experience, but the biggest thing that came out of it was we didn't wipe on any boss. We didn't wipe on Jailer as much as we wiped on any other boss. Jailer, we 2-shot, and you basically skip phase 3 and then skip phase 4. It's the weirdest encounter now.
Yeah.
You do so much damage in phase 1 and 2 that by the time you get to phase 3, normally phase 3 initially was like a circuit course where you go to 4 different circuit stations and you have to do a different activity at each one. And then you progress into phase 4 and you sort of have like this giant meteor slam that knocks you backwards, and there's defile puddles that you're dropping every time you do torments, and etc. And now that phase 3 is literally you do the first circuit position and then you push to phase 4. Like, you skip 3 other things that you normally do, and then you hit phase 4 and you eat 1 meteor cleave and then he dies. The very first meteor cleave he dies right after it. And so you don't deal with any of the torments or any of the bombs or any of the, like, none of that happens. And it's very weird that is what that fight is now. Like,
I mean, the nerfs were significant.
Yeah.
For sure. I think across all difficulties.
Yeah, it was just surprising that they hit the back end of the fight way more than the front end of the fight in how they chose to do nerfs. Like, they just, the phase 3, phase 4 is we got substantially easier versus phase 1, phase 2, which is basically the same thing at this point. In some cases, people are holding DPS in phase 1, phase 2, so they don't push early. So it's a little weird. I mean,
that's really smart. I think that's a smart way to approach it, because you figure teams are going to have the most practice in the first 2 phases of the fight, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the stuff that you're really going to have down, so if you make the back half of it that much easier, then that's less learning time that people have to put into it at this point when we're a couple weeks away from achievements going away.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was the Jailer experience this past week. From that, I got my from my cash this week, because I killed enough bosses to get 3 chances. I got my 285 shoulders off Rygalon, so I'm happy to. Or Rygalon? Anyways, I got my 285 shoulders, and so I'm happy to.
I think it's Lords, right?
It might be Lords.
Lords or
I think it is Lords. That's why I hesitated, but yes, I got those, and so I was happy to get a piece of loot out of my cash from the new fancy high-end mythic bosses, which we essentially had not seen, because when we killed Jailer, it was the only boss we killed. So this was the first week where we actually got cash reward loot that were chances at that kind of stuff.
Right.
Oh yeah. How about you? What was the past week like?
Well, man. Rating this week, this is the first time in this entire tier, which started in early March, that it felt like we were farming it. Like, finally, the tuning is finally in place. This is the first time we've killed all 11 bosses on Heroic in 1 week. That is maybe not really necessarily should be the case, right? Like, we're a pretty practiced heroic raiding team. We spend a lot of time farming heroic raids and kind of blazing through them in 2-ish hours a week after we have everything locked down. And Sepulchre just never got there until hopefully now. The Jailer nerfs felt great. I mean, they obliterated that boss on heroic. I had a 21 player group, I want to say, and I legit had 4 people die immediately in phase 1. They just one guy DC'd, 3 other people like brain farted and died to like mind controls or falling down holes, and it just fell over. Right. Even with 4 people dead in phase 1, like the amount of damage we lost in phase 1 and 2 with 4 DPS dead it wasn't even a factor. I mean, you still have to execute the fight properly. There are still mechanics you have to do, but the removal of the knockback from Decimator or whatever it's called, where he slings his mace out there, that's huge. It's so much less disruption.
On Mythic, I still get anxiety whenever that swirl comes out. My body still like looks at the swirl, looks at where the holes are, positions myself, and I'm like, no, just it's okay, relax. Like, you can relax. There's no knockback, relax.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself sliding over and repositioning and stuff every time it would go out, but it's kind of not as big of a deal for me anyway, since I'm the tank and I'm attached to the boss. But the removal of that knockback was actually maybe the biggest nerf besides the health nerf, because first of all, it completely eliminates just stupid mistake deaths, and it's so much less disruptive for everything else that's happening. So it just ends up being so much more uptime on the boss and everything. So it felt great. My only complaint here is that we only have 3 more weeks of it in this state, and then everything changes when season 4 starts. Like, this is the way it should have been at least 2, 4, 6 weeks ago. And it just didn't quite get there. I mean, there've been like, I don't know, 1,000 or so new jailer kills in the last week since these nerfs came in on heroic. Yeah. That's 20% more new AOTCs in 1 week. So I think it's accomplishing their goals. The other bosses felt really good too. The nerf to Lords of Dread especially was really significant because it just cuts out extra, ultimate phases and everything like that. When the bosses get full energy, like, their health is just chunking during swarms because they got reduced so much. So raid's feeling great. And actually we finished up so fast that I think we called it a bit early Wednesday because we didn't have a group to do Mythic. And then we did Sunday Fun Day. Like, people wanted to go. I took the monk in there. First time I've raided on the monk since Nathria. So that was awesome. We got all the way through. We actually got all the way through up to Jailer on normal in like 2 hours flat with some alts and some kind of janky tunes. We just didn't have any time to go any farther. So raid was really fun. Finally, I finally just like straight up had fun just farming out and chilling in Sepulchre this week. Mythic Plus was like a mixed bag. Oh, good.
I want to say the thing about the raid nerfs and it feeling more like farm now is, like, it had been in this state for long enough that you almost forgot what it should feel like right now, right? In the 3 weeks away from things starting to change up, in the tail end of a 3.5, 4 months into a raid tier, it should feel the way it feels now. That's how the raid should feel. And so we'd been sitting in this difficult state for so long, you almost forgot, oh yeah, this is what this should feel like, right?
Right. This is what farming 4.5 months in should be like.
Yeah.
Right? I think so. I mean, that's debatable, I guess, but it's what we're used to, and it's certainly a thing I like about the life cycle of a raid tier.
Yeah, it's what we're used to, and I do wonder, like, internally what the conversations were like of not just around, we got to get these numbers up and we need more people to see this content, we have to make it more accessible. Like, I'm sure those conversations happen, but also just around, like, isn't this normally when people are just like having a good time just destroying things inside raids? Like,
Yeah, like we powered up, we powered up so long ago, and it's just like, well, you needed to have this just to meet the bar. And now what do you do? You know what I mean? And there's no War Forging, Titan Forging. There's no like Concordance of Legion Fall equivalent where it's like you're getting a little stronger every week. So it's very welcome. It's a little too late. The season's a little too short for my taste overall, because I really like this raid, and I think it definitely has its rough edges, and they were mostly all tuning related, and they have smoothed it down so much. It's a shame that the season's ending so soon in some ways, but I did some Mythic Plus last week. We were focusing on 21s, trying to time some 21s, push a little bit of rating, but we didn't get anything done. It was a pretty good combo week, but you know what is not a good week for Sanguine and Storming is Tyrannical Theater of Pain. That place is pretty over the top with that much area denial and on the little platforms and on the bosses that have so much area denial already. So, I mean, it was fun trying to do something a little bit harder than what I'm used to. I mean, obviously 20 to 21 is not a super huge leap, but the scaling is noticeable. But only got in like 3 dungeons. I think I couldn't even get a second vault choice. Most of my week was actually working on my Blood Elf Paladin. I ended up just slamming Miss of Pandaria Time Walking to max out. I tried one, and the XP was actually like really good. With Rested, it was like half a level. Without Rested, it was like a third of a level. Plus, I was getting rep because I had my Silver Moon Tabard on, and I needed Exalted with Silver Moon to get the stuff that I wanted. So, I mean, they were pretty quick and easy runs. A lot of those dungeons are 3 boss dungeons. So they were like 10 minutes long. It's like a third of a level every 10 minutes. It was kind of ridiculous. It was repetitive, right? By the end, I was definitely ready to be done with Miss of Pandaria Time Walking for, the next few months, but it got the job done. And I got to say, the new Blood Elf questline is amazing. If you are... Yeah, it's funny because every time they put in new Blood Elf stuff, I'm like, Blood Elves are really not my jam. It's kind of not where I live inside the WoW sphere. But every time they put in new stuff, they just pull it off so well. The questline is amazing. You kind of go to Ghostlands to Tranquillion there, and you have to... There's like a Scourge uprising breaking back out in the Dead Scar and like the shadow of, Arthas and the Scourge destroying Silvermoon City, in Warcraft 3. And you have to go investigate it, and it's really cool. The new cosmetics are nice. Like the Emerald Hawkstrider is really cool. The Blood Knight armor, which was the main thing that I was doing, is really great to have on my account, even though I don't love the way it actually looks. But it was just a thing of like, I need to have this, which is why I guess I invested like 40 hours into leveling this character and getting this stuff. But it looks cool. It's a really unique look. Like if you see some people running around Ouroboros or whatever with it on, and it's like it really stands out. You get one new weapon for doing this stuff, which is it's a polearm, which it's nice looking and it looks really blood elfy, but its transmog uses are pretty limited since you only get a polearm. It's kind of disappointing. I can't use it on my mage. I can't use it on my demon hunter, and I can't use it on my prop pally. And I don't really want to play Ret. So I really kind of wanted like a shield and a one-hander to go with that Blood Knight armor. And I will admit I didn't do any research to see what it rewarded in terms of all the cosmetics you got, but I don't have anything in the collection that really looks great with the Blood Knight armor, so that's kind of a problem. But overall, it was a really fun project. I'm glad I did it. I had a great time playing through the new quest content, and I love collecting those kind of unique, heritage-style mogs. So no complaints there, but that's also off the list for the End of Shadowlands here. So now I'm kind of just waiting for the XP holiday to kick in Burning Crusade Classic so I can get rolling with that before Wrath comes out.
Right. Yeah, the other thing that went down last week, you were talking about Mythic Plus, was the Mdi Global Finals, right? That all happened this past weekend. I watched a good chunk of that. Got my
last traditional MDI of Shadowlands.
Yes, got my Fearless Spectator title, which we talked about on last week's show. Just had to watch for a certain period of time. And again, Team Echo, this is like the back-to-back winners or whatever it is at this point.
5 times in a row, right? Yeah.
Something like that.
But didn't they get dropped at a lower bracket and they had to claw their way back? Like they did get threatened a little bit. They weren't totally untouchable.
Yeah. But and there are, I mean, that just goes to speak to the level of talent that's in there of these teams that are able to go up against the champs and actually knock them down and have them work their way back up. No. But one of the ones I watched, because you were talking about Sanguine and tight hallways and whatnot, was one where a team lost because they were fighting a boss and a Sanguine pool dropped in the boss, and the boss stepped in the Sanguine pool and it killed the boss. No. And yeah, it was very bad.
That's just billions of health going onto
very bad.
A mob in a 5-player dungeon.
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting gameplay in that overall MDI, so I was glad that I tuned in and watched a chunk of it. And again, congrats to Echo and all the teams who competed in that. We're going to talk a little bit later on about the great push in this episode. So we'll talk a bit about that coming up in a while. We'll talk about it later. Anyways, is there anything else, Jason, you want to mention before we dive into what's going on this week?
I think that was it. That was my week. Yeah, I'm really hoping that we get that XP holiday like this week or next week, because I got into TBC yesterday for the first time since it came out. Basically, I respec my character for like solo leveling. I got at the Hellfire Peninsula. I started doing some quests, and I started getting into it. Man, I can't wait to dive back in there. All I'm really in it for is the leveling experience. But man, let's go with that XP holiday. Summer is a wasting.
Yeah. All right, with that, let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week in WoW is the Arena Skirmish bonus event. Oh my god, I had to scroll up to see it. I'd moved into the notes and I'd messed up my notes. All right, yes, the Arena Skirmish bonus event where the Sign of the Skirmisher buff is up. Honor gains from Arena Skirmishes are increased by 50%, and there's a quest to win 10, which rewards 250 Anima, 65 Conquest, and 2,000 Honor. So if you're someone who's doing some Arena Skirmishes this week or just wants to get some extra Conquest and Honor, that's a good way to do it. You can also check out a new deal quest from Patterns Within Patterns quests. Those are the weekly quests that you want to pick up if you want to get some extra rewards. The new deal quest in particular is super helpful if you're trying to get more honor and conquest. It's a good way to get some extra honor in there, as well as help you complete Patterns Within Patterns faster. The dungeon quests for the week are The Other Side and Mists of Tyrnacythe, and our PvP quests are Rated Battlegrounds and Epic Battlegrounds, and our brawl is Comp Stomp. So speaking of getting extra honor and extra conquest, it is the easy mode week for farm. Basically, you can get 5 marks of honor, 65 conquest, and 250 honor for winning one of these. The first time with the Something Different quest when you queue into it. That's the quest you get when you queue into a brawl. And otherwise, you can just farm, bots all day with 5-minute Arathi Basins and be all good to go with your Comp Stomp. So definitely take advantage of that if you're looking to get some honor this week.
I know people who are like actually into PvP want like solo shuffle added as a permanent thing to the game, and I understand that. But as somebody who doesn't PvP, I really want Comp Stomp as a permanent thing in the game.
Yeah.
I want to just do AB and murder bots if that's what I feel like doing at any point in time. It's so fun. You just feel so super powerful and cool in there running around, just slaughtering bots. And I probably almost certainly will not have time to really do it this week, which is sad. The timing just doesn't line up for me. But it's out there. If you've never done it, even if you don't like BGs or PvP at all, you should do it because it's really like you'll get a kick out of it, even if you're not a PvPer.
Yeah, but if you ever felt like you just wanted to dominate inside PvP, like you just wanted to roll up on someone and blow them up and feel really strong, that's what this event will do to you. You'll be able to roll up on one of these bots and just lay out all your big cooldowns and abilities and blow that person up without being chain stunned by rogues and whatnot at the same time. So it's lots of fun.
The advanced AI bots are smarter than your average NPC, but they're not going to put up much of a fight once you get everything rolling.
Yeah. All right, Jason, it's actually one of my favorite Torghast events happening at the moment. It's the Beast of Prodigium event. Do you want to go over it for us?
Yeah, so Beast of Prodigium means your first Maw-powered chest allows you to gain control of a powerful Maw beast that fights alongside you during your run. And subsequent powers you receive in this run have a chance to modify the beast and grant it special abilities. So you get an extra little doggo to go through Torghast with you, and you can power up your doggo friend as you get more anima powers. So this is, when this first came out, these things were kind of undertuned, but then they buffed them a lot, and they're pretty powerful. So if you are doing Torghast because you're doing the new stuff, the new tiers, or you're trying to get some achievements done or something, or you're leveling up, or you're collecting something out of there, this is a good week to do it because you can get some variety. I think one of the things about Torghast that sort of wore thin for me, even though I liked the concept of the mode initially, was that every run kind of felt the same beyond a certain point. You were always looking for the same kind of mix of powers. You sort of always ended up around the same type of build, basically. There wasn't much variation from run to run. So the holidays are a great chance to mix it up a little bit and do something different, and you can definitely power up a beast and start tearing up some Torghast. So that's a cool thing to do if that's on your menu this week.
Yeah. Also on the menu is world bosses. If you're someone who wants a 750, well, actually more than that, it's like 2,500 or 3,000 in anima. Feel free to knock out your world bosses for the week. Always a good thing to do. Also contributes towards that Patterns and Patterns quest when you're killing off Antros. And you might as well practice them up because, when Season 4 drops, you're going to want to start killing these things again because they're going to drop really nice loot. So, you might as well get practiced on them. This week is Valinor Light of the Eons, which is the big Colossus up in Bastion. And right now it's just dropping 207 eye level gear, but that will be gear that drops that you'll want once we hit Season 4. And something to keep in mind is there's plate helm off this, there's cloth hands. These are pieces that you can turn into tier pieces once we actually hit Season 4, which is going to be kind of exciting. So that'll be good for you. And then, Jason, which memories does Valinor drop?
So Valinor, you got your Archbishop Benedictus for priests, your Final Verdict for paladins, and your Wind Speaker's Lava Resurgence for shamans. So if you have one of those three and you don't know all your memories, don't forget to go kill Valinor this week and check that off the list.
Yeah. We also have Morgeth, Tormentor of the Damned, of course, and then I already mentioned Antros. Now, Antros, I'll be curious whether or not I assume his loot table gets upgraded during Sepulchre Week. That is my assumption, but we will have to see what actually ends up happening when Season 4 starts.
Yeah, the messaging on the world bosses seemed like they would all drop like 278s or something just all the time. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't paid attention to what that looks like on PTR or anything, so I don't know if obviously we have the rotating world boss, but we still have 3 world bosses. Are they all dropping equivalent loot? I don't know.
Does Morgeth's loot table get upgraded? Like, I'm curious about some of those, the niche things that don't necessarily fall under the default world boss kind of realm. Anyways, we'll have to wait and see, and that'll be cool to check out. It's a question to ask. All right, Mythic Plus wise, we got Fortified, Raging, and Explosive. This means non-boss enemies have more health and inflict increased damage, and non-boss enemies enrage at 30% health remaining, dealing increased damage until defeated. And while in combat, enemies periodically summon explosive orbs that will detonate if not destroyed. This is there is some symbiotic stuff between these, which is kind of lame. Basically, fortified wise, your mobs are going to have more health overall, which means when they hit 30% health remaining, they still have more health than they normally would have because they're fortified. So that 30% more health is just 30% health remaining is just more health than it normally would be. So they will sit in raging longer. Now, raging is dispellable, right? You got your hunters and your druids and your rogues and whatnot that can remove rage effects. So that does help in a big way, especially for those large mobs that do AoE damage or that can hit a tank really hard, just being sure you're getting dispels on raging on those. And then explosive obviously spawns these explosive orbs based off the amount of mobs you're in combat with. Because mobs are fortified, these orbs are going to spawn more, you're going to see more of them per pack you're pulling because trash is taking longer to die. So you're going to be throwing more time basically into your trash than you normally would on top of fortified, right? Because you're not only dealing with fortified mobs that have more health, but you're also having to divert globals to hit explosive orbs, which will also lower your damage. So it's going to be a slower trash week. I mean, the positive is, again, as always, it's a fortified week, which means, your Theater of Pain is going to be much easier to do when it comes to killing bosses, since you're not dealing with tyrannical. So I don't think it's the easiest week out there, but it's also not incredibly punishing because raging, as long as you have a way to dispel it, or at least you're being wise with it, it's not crazy. And the biggest thing is just paying attention to explosive orbs. 1 or 2 explosive orbs going off can wipe your group. So just being sure that you're just, being diligent with the orbs and knocking them out.
Yeah, explosive can really throw a monkey wrench into your plans this week. And it does make it hard to pull big, which you may still want to do on Fort weeks. If you can, it's always advisable to pull as big as you're comfortable with, right? And explosive is going to reduce that buffer of comfort that you enjoy. This is going to make doing stuff like a Gambit pretty tough to get in under the timer this week because you want to pull that Murloc area heavy. You want to pull everything, and you're already having to switch and break the fish sticks and all that stuff, or stun them from even casting. You pull in these big packs, and even stuff that doesn't have on-death effects is a viable explosive target. So there are certain dungeons that are going to be really tough. You point out Theater of Pain. I think that one is actually okay because you don't really have any situations where you need to do massive pulls. you're mostly looking at like 5 pulls and stuff, which are reasonably manageable with explosive. So that's not bad. I mean, explosive does have some really annoying synergy with some bosses. Missive Tyrannus Scythe comes to mind. And again, Gambit also comes to mind. Any fight that has adds or other stuff that spawns in during the fight that can be an explosive target, that can be really difficult. You're already fighting a Keystone Dungeon boss. You're dealing with, all the scaled up damage and everything. And then you have other stuff spawning in that if you don't pay attention to and may be very distant, then you could take a lot of damage. So it's kind of a mixed bag, I think, this week is what I would say. I don't love this combo. But it's also not, it's not like terrible. You just have to really set maybe a more deliberate pace than you would some other weeks, unless you have somebody who's just a pro with tag and explosives, right? Like if you have somebody who's really confident in doing that, then they can kind of manage that process, and you can pull, a bit bigger at any given time. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's not. This isn't really like, it wouldn't be on my wish list of like what combos do you want to see before the end of the season. Like I don't know if this one is up there for me, but it's not. It's also not terrible, and also the lack of tyrannical, it lowers the bar. Even if you end up in a bad situation, right, where your timer is expired or whatever, and you've had some problems, when you kill a trash mob in a dungeon, it's dead. If you wipe on a boss at 11%, you got to do the whole fight all over again, and that's just a lot less likely to happen on a 4 week. So, it's it is what it is. We got to do something in these dungeons, right? They got to test us somehow. So, that's kind of what I'm feeling like for this week.
I'm definitely curious as to what our first few episodes, once season 4 hits, are going to be like, talking about the new dungeon pool.
I'm going to get on here and be like, everybody in my party had Grimrail Depot keys.
Uh-huh.
And it was sanguine, and I spent 9 hours in 4 dungeons last week. That's my prediction.
It could be. It's looming now, right? We've gotten closer and closer and closer to it, so now it's kind of like, okay, this is actually happening. We're going to be seeing season 4 in just a few weeks, which means we're going to start having some recommendations for these dungeons coming up soon. So we should probably like look back and, try and remember what Karazhan was like at some point soon. I'm certainly going to be running a lot of M+ that week just to sort of get my head wrapped around it. I do hope that first week is a little bit more forgiving for us. It's not a tyrannical / something really mean combo.
Yeah, I think Fort Week is a better way to start, and not explosive, because you can't afford that much attention diversion and that many lost globals on an early season Fort Week, unless the scaling is a little bit, more gentle.
Yeah, it could be. All right, Luminous Luminaries. The micro holiday is coming up, so be sure that you're taking advantage. That's this Wednesday, the 13th of July, and this is the Abyssal Depths kind of craziness that exists. Basically, the GG Engineering have discovered luminous creatures in the depths of Vashir, and they need your help to research the creatures before they disappear into the deep sea once again. It's actually one of the coolest concepts based on reality for me, is when you do have these crazy looking abnormal creatures that live way, way, way deep down in the ocean, whose bodies are like adapted for pressure and adapted for being in total darkness, and can hunt and eat and survive in those environments, that sort of come up to the surface, is something that's a pretty unique and crazy and cool thing. So this is the Warcraft version of that, where you essentially get, special lures where you can interact with them with the submarine and see them all. And yeah, it's cool. It's a cool event.
Yeah, and it's very appropriate for summertime, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, right? And you might be like out in the ocean or whatever. And I guess if you're a Hearthstone player, we've been underwater a lot so far this year. So this is not in the same place as that, but it's not too far off thematically from like Sunken City in Hearthstone. So
yeah,
pretty cool. Yeah, if you need something to do tomorrow or you want to go check it out, don't forget it's out there.
Yeah, I don't think I've checked this out since the first time it happened. So I think I do need to actually check it out at some point here, to actually remember more about it. All right, last week we had said that the Hall of Fame was closed for Alliance because more than 100 teams had killed it, and that was on a Friday or Saturday, so it made sense that it would close on that Tuesday, and that's what everyone believed would happen. And then I was playing around on World of Warcraft on Tuesday and saw the pop-up, congratulations to such and such team for killing Mythic Jailer, Hall of Fame, etc., etc. And I was like, oh, well, that's weird. And then we slowly but surely started to see more of them. And it was like, so I guess the Alliance Hall of Fame didn't close even though there were 100 teams in it before reset. And so we got a post from Bornak that says, near the end of last week, Sepulchre of the First One's Hall of Fame filled for Alliance guilds. Eligibility for the in-game achievement was intended to end with reset this week, but there was an error with disabling the process. Out of fairness for players' raid schedules in all regions, Hall of Fame will now be closed with the weekly reset on Tuesday, July 12th, as in today. So, yeah, if you happen to get a title that, you're like the 130th or 180th team to kill, then congratulations on getting your title. That was a unintended thing, but, out of fairness, I get it.
Yeah, it's cool for everybody that snuck in there. And hey, anytime there's like an issue like that on the tech side or whatever, the administrative side that works out in a player's favor, that's a good thing. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool for anybody who got it in there at the last minute.
And then, this next post, Jason, comes in from Skarzard, and it's about raid rewards experiments in Season 4.
Yes, this is like if you remember a couple months ago, Skarzard put a monster post on the forums about how some rewards were going to work in Season 4, talking about the vendor, talking about being able to upgrade items from one difficulty tier to another. And so this is just some follow-up on that. It's actually pretty in-depth follow-up on that after some PTR testing and some other feedback. So this is what we have. This is where they're at right now as we're just a couple weeks out from the Season 4 roll.
Yeah, and what they sort of decided was they didn't like the pacing at which some of the rewards were earned at the moment. And so they're still discussing internally as to what these numbers would actually look like. But basically goes into detail saying players clearing 10 fated bosses per week would acquire their season's limit of dinar, which is the currency used to buy fated raid items, by week 6 at the earliest. We're going to lower the number of kills required on each quest such that it'll land somewhere between the 4.5 to 5 week range instead. And so this is them going, Dragonflight's coming pretty soon. We don't want the system to be something that you basically only get to experience twice inside of the season or once or twice inside of the season. That's not great. Let's make sure people are actually hitting that cap with fewer bosses killed, because that also means if you're not clearing 10 bosses a week, because I'm just going to put it out there as a Mythic Raider, I'm not necessarily in for every single boss every week of a clear. It would suck to be like, yeah, this got extended out far enough. I never actually hit my cap for the entire season. So I am glad that they're looking at reducing that to make it a little bit easier for people to hit. They've also heard a lot of feedback about how if you join late into Season 4 or had alts you wanted to play, you'd be met with a fairly large wall of quests and bosses to kill necessary to access the system, which they felt ran counter to the lessons learned from the Creation Catalyst. So after a certain period, they'll be heavily reducing the requirements of the 3 quests. This is a way for the initial progression experience of early Season 4 to be intact. But as it goes later on, you'll be able to raid on new characters or with a new friend without being far behind. We're not currently looking at changing the rate of acquiring the materials to upgrade the fated or heroic or mythic items, but it'll stay at 100% drop rate from heroic and mythic and then require 20 to transform. So again, hearing feedback from players, hey, we want better catch-up mechanics. You did something decent with Creation Catalyst. Could we have something similar? Yes, they're going to essentially later in the season just reduce the requirements on all the quests, and that will reduce the requirements, which means that you get it faster, which means that if you have more characters, you can take advantage. So pretty cool that way. Glad to see it.
Yeah, these are really good changes for something that's so time limited, and it's starting to really feel like we're not going to have very much time in Season 4 at all, which kind of, that means that, okay, if one character has to wait 6 weeks to get their 3 items from the vendors, then is that like halfway through the season?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
It's like, how much time do you actually have to enjoy that? How does that work out? And then, yeah, what if you have more than one character and you don't have time to raid on more than one character, but you want to play them and collect these items and stuff? What are you supposed to do? So having a catch up in there sounds good. And I would imagine there will also be some people strolling back in at the very tail end of season 4 as Dragonflight is really spinning up to come check it out. And then they can still at least maybe work towards one reward or something like that, which would be really cool. So
yeah,
this stuff is really in line with a lot of the philosophy we've seen out of the team over the last, year here, give or take, I would say. Maybe, well, I guess since like November last year, we've really seen a shift in the way that they're rewarding playtime and thinking about people who maybe play more than one character at a high level or have like expectations about being able to get, kitted out on more than one character in a reasonable amount of time. So these are good changes. I mean, I think these are natural things to be looking at, considering the reality of the situation and, how long season 4 is likely to last, which to me seems like we're looking at, I don't know, 3-4 months here, is going to be the whole thing. So 6 weeks is a pretty big chunk of that. If we cut it down to 4.5, sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with you that I feel like if the entire purpose of season 4 is to experiment and try out new things, it doesn't make sense to put things in that take long enough to be able to accomplish to actually get the experience that players aren't able to do that within the time frame before the next thing comes out. Right? Like,
we want to be able to use the stuff, not just buy it off the vendor. We want to kill stuff with it.
And you want players to have that full experience so that they can voice feedback, so that they know what this is going to feel like overall, and whether it's something you want to continue doing. So make it accessible. That is the important thing. Make it something that within this, if it's 3 months that we have for this season, it's 12 weeks, then be sure that we actually have enough time to accomplish everything in 4 to 6 weeks so that we can actually have fun with it for a period of time. And if you're not playing every single week in that period of time, you can still accomplish it, right? Every sort of skill set / time commitment of players should be able to actually experience some of the fun stuff with season 4, so they all have feedback that they can voice. So they also go into talking about the Keystone Hero achievements. Basically, that's the reward you get for completing +20s. They're going to give Heroes Path portals to locations for Grimrail Depot and Iron Docks and Karazhan and Mechagon. They're going to continue that, and they'll operate just like the ones that exist inside Shadowlands at present. So basically, that means that if you teleport to an Iron Docks, run an Iron Docks, and complete it, it will reset your teleport for all of your keystones, and you can keep going. So kind of cool that they're adding this in.
This is great. I mean, and it's great confirmation, like way out in front of the season roll here, a few weeks out in front. Like, okay, I can kind of think about what my goals are now. Like, I would love to collect all these portals. I mean, just for posterity to be able to just port over to Draenor or to Karazhan or Mechagon or whatever, anytime you want to. That sounds really nice. So there was some question about this because I guess on PTR, and I'm not sure if they're planning on shipping this, I just don't know, but you can just portal right to where these dungeons are. So you don't have to go to your garrison and then fly to, Grimrail Depot.
Right.
So, the question comes up well, what's the point of having the portals then if you can just go there from Orbos anyway? And the point is that you have them on that character for the rest of the game's life, and that's pretty awesome. So, well,
and they've retired portals before. I want to emphasize that.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't know what's going to happen.
Right. My guess would be if the intent is that season 4 rolls out with those portals in Orbos on live, that they go away when Dragonflight comes out. That would just be natural. They've done that before.
Yeah.
And yeah, just having such a unique reward with such cool utility on your character forever that's enough motivation for me to want to get back up there and do season 4 20s. So hopefully that's where we end up. It's a little daunting because we don't have a lot of time here, as we keep saying, and we're going to be some of these dungeons. The Warlords dungeons have never existed as Keystone dungeons, right? And it took them a little while to get Tazavesh feeling like it was in a good place. Mechagon and Karazhan we haven't seen in years, so who knows how what the tuning is going to look like when they get plugged in as level 60 dungeons. It's it might be a bit of a roller coaster there, so it's definitely something to shoot for though. I love the portal unlock system, and I hope they keep that going every expansion, every season, whatever. It sounds like the plan going forward is they're going to continue to mix up dungeon pools and have like some current expansion dungeons and some older dungeons as keystones per season. If you could unlock portals just like all over the entire game world, like all the different continents and planets and dimensions and stuff from doing 20s, like I think that's a great benefit to, influence people to want to try to push harder, try to develop that mastery of the system and get those dungeons in time, because those are really cool rewards.
Well, and to play the game while it's relevant, right? Because that's how you get it. You get them by playing during the season when the season's relevant, and I think that's a really attractive thing. And, I know that there were challenge modes back in Warlords, and so some people might already have portals to the Warlords ones because that was part of the reward system for those.
Yeah, that's true.
But they won't. I don't think they work like the new ones do. The old portals, I think, are just on set timers, whereas the new ones have timers that reset. So I think that is an attractive reason to get them. I certainly want Mechagon because to be honest, like, any reason for me to go to BFA, I just enjoy. I love those zones. Those are gorgeous zones. I lived in them doing my farm for my neck for like 2 years. Like, it was like hour and a half a day living in those zones. And so I don't know. For me, there's a very home feeling to me about going to BFA.
Yeah, I think I spent enough time in Mechagon and BFA. I did the pre-nerf Mechadon, which was, oh man, I really did feel like I lived there for a while.
I know.
It's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
I wouldn't want to live in Mechagon, but I don't know. BFA to me, that especially.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The zones are just phenomenal.
The design was great. It felt so Azerothian, which is certainly missing from this expansion by design, obviously. And it felt so grounded. It felt like it always belonged there, even though there were new spaces we were going to, and that could be tricky to pull off. And I think they nailed it. But yeah, just being able to zip around wherever you want to go, man, that's the great thing about this system. So I hope they always do that.
No. Now, to ease people's minds, while ahead of the curve and cutting edge feats of strength are going away when Season 4 launches, the carcinized Zareth Steed from killing Heroic Jailer, as well as the 100% drop rates for Mythic Sylvanas and Jailer mounts, aren't going away until Dragonflight launches. So just that FYI of people who are curious about getting those mounts and wanting to get their mounts, we have confirmation that until Dragonflight launches, they will remain 100%. Once Dragonflight launches, they just significantly drop to like a 1% drop rate or whatnot off of those bosses. So, you want to get them in the next few months while we still can. I guess it would be next 6 months, potentially, depending on when we actually hit the official launch of what's happening with it, right? Whether that's November or December or whatever.
I think they usually stick around in pre-patch.
They do tend to stick around in pre-patch. So
so it's, and usually stuff balance goes out the window in pre-patch. So stuff tends to get a bit easier. So that might be a good chance to do it. But this is good. I mean, last week we sort of, we talked quite a bit about the end of the season, kind of the surprise announcement, at least to me, about like how early the season was actually ending and the fact that they were shutting these achievements off. And that's kind of a bummer, but I think, a lot of people are in it for the mounts more so than the achievement. Obviously, like, the achievement's cool and all, but it's not as impactful to, your character's look as a mount, of course. So it's nice that they're leaving the mounts on, including from Mythic Sylvanas, which, might be something that people missed out on. And as we kind of get, closer towards the end here, it's a cool reason for teams to keep trying new bosses and pushing stuff down and seeing if you can get some more mounts out to the group. Like, those are great motivators for people to play late in the expansion. So definitely softens the blow of the achievements going away. I think the mounts are really what people are in it for when you get down to the nitty gritty here at the end of the expansion.
Yeah. And I mean, it always has been that way. They also confirmed that Valor will be reset, but there's not going to be any weekly caps for Season 4 for the duration of Season 4. Same thing with Conquest. Actually, Conquest says they'll have higher weekly caps than previous seasons. So I guess there is still Conquest caps, but they're just going to be much higher than they were previously. And then they'll go to being fully uncapped within a number of weeks of Season 4 launch. So it won't be too long before that happens. But the nice thing being, just if you're someone who wants to do Valor stuff, you can just go nuts with Valor at the very beginning. You can run as many dungeons as you want. You can pump the item level of gear up all you want and enjoy that while it exists.
This is amazing news. Like, I really didn't think that this would be the case if Valor would just come out straight up uncapped. So that's really good news because, the cap is not very generous with Valor, and it's like you do a couple keystones and you're probably Valor capped, and you have, maybe you have other dungeons you want to do that week, or maybe you're going to do other dungeons anyway because you're trying to get 4 or 8 in for the week. You have callings that give Valor on a daily basis, which is not like a great way to obtain Valor, but there are many other benefits for doing your callings. So now you're not capping out on that. And, Valor in a shortened season like this, Valor is going to be really important really early on, and then it's going to become worthless. You're not going to, it's not like you're going to be farming Valor for months on end here. So this is a great call. Conquest to me is a little bit different because you have that direct competition with other players. So it helps, keep people within a power band for a few weeks where somebody doesn't just zoom ahead because they can queue arenas all day and somebody else can't. But it sounds like they don't plan on keeping the cap in place for very long anyway. So I think that makes sense. Give it, I don't know, 3-4 weeks with a cap, something like that, and then let it rip. That seems like a good way to go with PvP. And with PvE, yes, people want to compete on meters and stuff, but ultimately it's a co-op mode and you're trying to defeat computer-controlled enemies together. So if your teammates are more powerful, then your computer-controlled enemies are going to die more efficiently and you're going to benefit from that. So, this is a really weird situation and they're doing some weird stuff and just trying stuff out. And I think, going in with uncapped Valor is absolutely the right call.
Yeah, I think it'll certainly help a lot of players get through the content and experience the content in the way they want to experience it, which I think is great. Okay, the meat of this episode. There's certainly been a lot that we want to chat about, but something we really want to cover in this episode is something I've been asking for I think 4 expansions now, maybe more than that, something like that, and it's finally starting to happen. They are revamping Professions in Dragonflight, and they put out this ginormous preview, absolutely massive preview, and this is to sort of get people a little bit more excited about Professions and interested in Professions is why we kind of want to cover this on today's episode, because I think it's just very cool. All right, so there are 3 main pillars of revamped Professions that are happening inside of Dragonflight. The first is crafting orders, the second is Professions specializations, and the third is crafting and gathering quality. Okay, those are the 3 new things that they're kind of playing around with. So crafting orders basically allows you to pop open a order on the auction house for what you want. Inside of this order, you can say, hey, I want someone to craft a pair of legs for me at this particular item level. And you can provide materials for that. Sometimes you have to provide soulbound materials, whatever it is, through the interface. You essentially click the boxes of the materials you want to provide. And stuff you aren't provided, obviously the person who's crafting for you will need to provide for you. You can provide optional reagents, things like missives that we have right now for legendaries for applying particular stats and whatnot. And the person will basically craft that for you. And I keep saying the person, but the person can actually even be specified. You can say, I want to create a crafting order for only this particular character to be able to make for me, or only people on my friends list and in my guild, or just anyone at all. So if you end up having like a favorite crafter, if you have a buddy you're trying to help out with their crafting profession, if you want to be sure that only your guildies are the ones crafting things for you so that they are the only ones benefiting from crafting these pieces of gear and getting skill ups on their professions, you can do that. That's one of the options inside of this, which I think is amazing and awesome. Once your pieces are crafted, basically it's just delivered to you in the mail. You're going to pay a small fee for posting it, as you would with any kind of auction. And they sort of talk about it with this like crafting almost union. The Artisans Consortium is who you're sort of paying this fee to, which I think is neat. It sort of fits with the lore of the whole thing, which is cool. And then as a crafter, obviously this is a great way for you to essentially pop open your crafting screen or your auction house screen and make a bunch of gold by actually crafting this stuff for people, and more importantly, and probably the coolest part, increasing your skill level without having 15 or 16 belts sitting in your inventory, right? You can go up here and go, hey, you know what? I want to increase my crafting skill by accepting work orders, and this way these are all going to people. I'm essentially selling them as I make them. Like it's all happening within one transaction, and it helps out your friends and guildies and everything. So like that's the initial sort of like preview that they've given us of the crafting orders, and I think that's overall a great system. They showed a bunch of in the blog post they put up, which I'll link in the show notes. There's a bunch of screenshots. It certainly looks slick and like it should look, and makes me happy to see.
Yeah, I think crafting orders they're a great innovation to the game. It's pretty simple, right? I think if you've played WoW and you understand the process of buying, selling, and crafting things, like, you can kind of innately understand what happens with a crafting order. The big thing here is I think it makes the other elements that they're talking about, the other two pillars, really click, because it helps you, funnel your efforts into things that there's a market for, which is really important. That's maybe a learned lesson from Legendary Crafting in Shadowlands. You make 15 of an item that hopefully somebody wants one of them and they don't, and then you just have it forever and you can't do anything with it. At least this way, if you want to work in your professions, you can go check crafting orders and see what do people want that you can make, and then you can make some gold for your trouble, get some skill ups in the process. That sounds great to me. That sounds like a thing I would do, like when I had downtime in the game or whatever. That sounds like an actual gameplay avenue, more so than it has been up to this point. Also, the fact that you can sort of filter your crafting orders for guildies, like you were talking about, is great, because a really big thing that you're going to want to pay attention to with your guild when this comes out is making sure that you have appropriately skilled crafters in the guild.
Yeah. And
so if you need something made, you should have a guildie make it. Don't just put it out there for anybody to benefit from. Now the process of buying or receiving a crafted item is a lot more mutually beneficial than it has been in the past, I would say. I mean, before, you kind of just had the gold exchange. It was like, well, it's cool to have gold for this thing that I can click on in my UI. But, with the focus on specialization and with quality, you're really going to want to take as many of those orders as you can, get those skill ups wherever you can get them. And you want to keep those in the family, so to speak, right? Like, you want the other people that you play with benefiting from rounding out your tune's gear or whatever it is you're doing. So, yeah. I think these are great innovations that should really cut down on bloat and annoying repetition within the crafting system, which, I would say that overall, historically, WoW has been pretty crafting light compared to a lot of other MMOs. In a lot of other games in the genre, crafting is a much bigger part of your activities traditionally, and gearing and stuff. And WoW has kind of been more about questing and combat and stuff over the years. I don't think that this is like a bad direction for them to go in, because it seems like something that's intrinsic to your character, which is a really important part about doing this big rework. You want to sort of identify your character by their profession specialization. You want them to get, as much skill to make the highest quality stuff that you possibly can. And then how do you benefit from that? By utilizing crafting orders to help out people that you play with, or help out, potential customers in your server group, or whatever the case may be. So, it sounds really good. This is sort of the more, I guess, like, transparent part of this blog. Like, this is the part that makes the most sense if you're totally uninitiated with this, because there are some pretty big changes coming to the other elements of crafting.
Yeah. So, to dig into something you mentioned there as well, as far as the specializations go, picture like when you're looking to get something crafted by an artisan, right? You're like, okay, I really want to get, let's just, pick something easy, like a sword. I really want to get a sword. And so I'm going to try and find the best sword maker I can possibly find. And the best sword maker is probably the person who's been making swords, and primarily just swords, for the last 20 years, and that's what they've been doing, and they, are expert at it, they're supreme at it, they're great at it. This is where profession specializations sort of come in. Basically, professional specializations will allow you to specialize in your primary crafting and gathering professions once you've reached high enough skill. You will earn specialization points through a variety of activities and get to spend them to permanently improve different areas of your profession. In other words, there's basically kind of like a talent tree that you can't reset kind of concept for your professions. This will be one way that you can differentiate yourself from your peers and specialize in each sort of profession. So you might be like, okay, does this mean that I can make special swords that other people can't make? To a certain degree, yes, but more importantly, this ties in with crafting and quality. So the crafting and quality aspect of this whole thing is crafted equipment will have 5 levels of possible quality. And while many other crafted and gathered item professions such as potions and ores will only have 3 levels of quality, and then there's some things where basically the rule is if it's something you need a profession to harvest, it's going to have levels of quality. If it's something like meat or cloth or whatnot that drops off of killing something, not going to have quality. That's the general rule for this whole thing when you're trying to figure out quality. For crafted equipment, quality will primarily modify the item level, with each level of quality increasing by a small amount. For example, a piece of crafted leveling gear might be item level 270, and then that's at tier 1 of crafting, and then go up by 2 item levels to 272 at tier 2, etc., up to 280 at tier 5. In all cases, the goal is to have quality matter enough for it to be worth your effort to achieve higher qualities without having the gains be so large that the lowest quality versions don't feel worthwhile. So that, the difference between the base item and the max item is 10 item levels, which is a nice difference, but there's a lot of work to get to that max item level. And that's kind of what they're emphasizing, right?
Right. And like the 270 piece, on a range from 270 to 280, it's not like the 270 piece is unusable. It's just not desirable compared to the 280 piece.
Yeah.
I think one thing to maybe just clarify here, or just hammer home, is like they're introducing some new terminology here. And quality, when we think of quality, we think of things like rare, epic, legendary, whatever. That's not what... There's like a completely different set of iconography that shows you your 1 to 5 star quality. And this is all related to stuff that goes into a craft and the finished product. So just keep that in mind. And check out the blog. You'll see some examples of what the UI is currently looking like in terms of how it visually calls out like a tier 1 versus a tier 3 reagent, for example. I think it's more intuitive to see than to talk about, probably, which makes our job a little bit difficult. But basically the idea is that you sort of have this range. You have 1 to 5 star mats, and they can result in 1 to 5 star finished products, like equipment, for example. So really adding a lot of breadth to the crafting system. Whereas, now and since forever, you pick up a thing. Once you pick up enough of thing, you turn it into other thing, and that's just all it's ever going to be. There's a much broader range of stuff that you can do with this system.
Yeah. So this is all, again, goes into like finding that highly skilled artisan, right? If you want to get that 280 item level gear, you're going to want to seek out the person who can actually accomplish this skill wise. They put in the effort, they put in the time to get their crafting and specialize and to be able to make that particular thing for you. And it gets even more cool than that, to be honest, which we'll talk about in a second. So for crafted items such as consumables, the quality of the effect are a bit more varied. Basically, for most, a higher quality result in a more powerful effect, but in some cases it might come in form of a variation such as longer duration or more charges, something like that. So you can picture like your combat potion that you use at the start of a pull on a boss, or during heroism or whatever it is, lasting 10 seconds longer, or proccing slightly more often, or just hitting, like giving you just more main stat or more damage effect than it previously did. This is sort of where that crafting quality will sort of kick in. For reagents that have quality, the quality value will serve as a major input into crafting. Basically, crafting with higher quality basic reagents will directly provide a bonus skill when crafting them. For finishing reagents, there are a new type of reagent that can be used to improve aspects of the crafting process, increasing skill or crafting stats, for instance. So what I want to emphasize here is that they've basically added additional crafting stats, all right? There's inspiration, resourcefulness, multi-craft, and crafting speed. Inspiration basically is while someone's crafting something, they have a chance at getting extra skill out of crafting it. So that concept of, let's say you have 100 total tailoring skill, as opposed to gaining 1 point for crafting a piece of gear, you might gain 3 points because of the inspiration, right? That being the concept. Obviously, that's a little bit rudimentary compared to what this new system looks like, but that's the general concept of what this would work, of how this would work. It sort of rolls the dice and gives you that chance. They also, inspiration is kind of an RNG way of potentially getting some bonus quality. So basically, when you actually are crafting, there's a chance that something that you were crafting at quality 2, tier 2, might come out as quality 3. That's the other part where inspiration can sort of kick in. So it's this duality of you can potentially get extra skill, and you can also potentially produce something at extra skill, which I think is kind of cool. All right, resourcefulness. Basically, resourcefulness is there's a chance you're just going to use fewer reagents, like ore or herbs or whatever it is, to make something. So you can increase your resourcefulness based off of which finishing reagents you're using or the quality of reagents you're using, and that is another way it could affect it. Multi-craft is our good old-fashioned procking more potions. It's coming back.
We're potion procs, yeah. And file procs now?
Yep. Basically, as long as the item that you're crafting is stackable, multi-craft can potentially work on it, and you can apply multi-craft to it so that you can craft additional versions of it. And that's a percentage chance based off the finishing reagents and the quality of reagents you use to make you be able to proc more potions. And then last but not least, they just have crafting speed, which is crafting faster. So for people who are like, I want to mass produce a ton of these things for the auction house, you can choose to get a bunch of crafting speed with a finishing reagent and just pump them out super quickly and be done all your crafting in no time at all. As opposed to, I remember in BFA getting a proc for basically there was the potion you drank that then gave you a chance to proc crafting additional things. And that potion lasted a finite period of time and was an RNG chance to get it to actually roll on the thing that let you do that. And there was that limited window you could craft during. And so this would be one of those cases where, crafting faster would have been amazing inside that situation. And they specifically talk about it as people who want to mass produce things for the auction house. That's going to help you do that a bit faster. So that's the way they lean in that whole thing. But
so we finally got new stats. We've been saying for a while we need some new stats. The stat pool's a little stale. We got them. Not quite the ones I was expecting, but this is really cool because you could kind of see some sort of different ways that you would pivot off of different stats, right? Like you might, when you're at lower skill, as you're working on your profession, you might want more inspiration on the gear that you're using for crafting, right? Because then you might proc some higher skill end results. But then once you're skilled up, you might want resourcefulness or multi-craft to make the most out of your gathering, right? Like, or if you're just making low quality stuff because maybe the way the market bears out, like just 1-star healing pots are just, everybody just wants those, then maybe you go like multi-craft and crafting speed and you're just pounding out 1-star potions all the time, right? And saving yourself time that way. But if you're making high level gear, weapons and armor, then you want resourcefulness because you're saving yourself a ton of mats per craft. Like, they're really cool ideas. It's a much more robust way of looking at crafting as like an RPG activity in World of Warcraft than we've ever seen before. Like, yes, we've had profession specializations before. It was more or less like talk to an NPC, do some stuff. Okay, you get this bonus when you craft this particular thing. This is sort of taking that concept to a completely different level of depth and complexity and end results and hopefully like player interaction. Like my hope is that this is going to feel really cool and feel like a way to kind of differentiate your character and what they're good at and hopefully make you some gold and help out your fellow players in the process. So I think being able to, set up your crafting gear in a way that really synergizes with what your goals are for what you're crafting is a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm super pumped about this entire system overall, but I do love the idea of being like, oh, I'm going to add this particular, special finishing reagent, which is going to then buff what I'm crafting in a certain way. And that gets even more developed as they go on and talk a little bit farther into the profession stuff here. So as far as the quality philosophy goes, the example they use is if you wanted to craft the most difficult recipes at max quality, for example, a chest with an item level equivalent to that of Mythic Raid. Yes, that is possible. And I just want to stop here for a second and go, thank you, because this is what I've been asking for years. I want crafting to be something that is entirely viable for players to do right up until endgame. Like, it shouldn't be something where crafting's great for the first 2 weeks of the expansion, and then no one touches it again, really, unless they absolutely are forced to, like the legendary crafting stuff, right? It shouldn't be that situation. Crafting should be something that you can take full advantage of throughout the entire expansion. So the fact that this is possible, regardless of what's required to do it, is great. It's an aspiration, it's a goal for people to strive for.
Yeah, and it's a nice supplement to other stuff you're already doing, right? Because in large part, your ceiling is going to kind of land where your top end of content is. It's going to be really hard to get the reagents to make like mythic quality item level gear if you're not doing like mythic rating, a high level mythic keystones, or a high rated PvP. But it's another avenue to get some more gear, spec out your character a different way, get some different stats or whatever, knock out a few important pieces to kind of kit your character out with. Those are options we haven't really had. It's much more deterministic than the systems that we have right now to kind of fill in those blanks, which I think is a great thing. And it's an avenue for you to engage with the game, to find stuff to do, to power up, and to be rewarded for the time that you put in the game. That is like intrinsic to your character. We hope. I mean, my hope would be that this is not like a Dragonflight experiment, and that the plan is to roll this all back in 4 years. Like, hopefully, they just continue to expand on these ideas, because, like historically, I mean, for the last many years, in terms of crafting, it's like, okay, years and years ago, there were certain instances where you needed to craft particular gear, resist gear or whatever, so that you could survive a fight. Okay, like that's a way you can use crafting in a game like WoW. It doesn't feel really interactive or fun. It just feels like a bar you need to clear in a kind of a grindy way. And then, we've seen over the years sometimes like there will be a crafted piece that's best in slot for a raid tier, or something like that, or it's on par with the best stuff that's available from a raid, like a piece for a spec, and then maybe a few specs are in that boat where a crafted piece is very desirable. In this expansion, obviously, everybody needs a crafted legendary, but as we've kind of beat that horse to death on the show, like that whole system felt so bad, and it really didn't live up to its potential. This seems a lot different. Like if you invest in crafting professions, or if you just know somebody who invests in them and you are out doing other content and gathering soulbound reagents and stuff, then crafting is just as viable an avenue for you kitting out your character as anything else you're doing in the game, for the most part. I mean, I think the restriction is going to be what they're currently talking about is unique 5. So you can have 5 pieces of crafted gear on, or a 2-handed weapon counts as 2. Which is a lot more than what we've had lately, which has mostly been like 1, right? So, if you get 5 pieces of gear on your character from one source, that's a significant part of your kit, and then you can get other drops from other places, and, who knows, maybe get other vendors or other deterministic systems where you're, cashing in some bad luck over a certain period of time. Like, I think that opens the door to all kinds of stuff like that. So, still, just being able to augment the drops that you're getting and in a meaningful way, that sounds great to me. And it's gameplay focused, right? And it's not tied to a particular thing. It's not go do Torghast for 4 hours this week, and then 2 weeks from now you can make the thing that you want. It's go play the game, collect these items, and then funnel them into the system, and then you can benefit with character power.
Yeah, it's
at least that's the impression that I'm getting from the way they're describing it. Like, maybe there will be certain things where you have to do something odious in order to get a soulbound reagent, but we don't have a Torghast equivalent. We don't have, an Island Expeditions equivalent. As far as we know, these are not, there's no feature outside of very traditional WoW content in Dragonflight.
Yeah, that's the big thing to emphasize, and they go into this restriction, which is basically in order to craft, let's say, this mythic chess piece, you fully specialize in crafting the type of gear. So you have to find a crafting person who has fully specialized in making chess pieces all the way up skill-wise. They use all top quality reagents. So let's say if there is, when you're herbing, there's someone who's really specialized in, in leveling up their herbing really far, and they pick really particular rare flowers, right? to be able to use inside crafting this, or particular ore. I'm using the chess piece example. Let's stick with ore. So picking, really gathering special ore to be able to do it. And all of which would require extremely skilled gatherers and crafters as well to be able to get these top quality reagents. So it might be something where not only are you having to find someone who can gather this really challenging to get ore, but you're also taking that challenging get ore and then having to smelt it into something special, like you're making some sort of aluminum or whatnot that's really particular and special, and that requires a skill set as well that's specialized in. And then they use the best profession gear you can find, which would also likely take highly specialized crafters to make. So they really emphasize that to do this, it's going to take a whole team of people to get together to do it, and even then, you got to be sure you have all the inspiration and whatnot applied to it to be able to make this really cool piece of gear. But won't it feel amazing when you actually pull off making this thing? Like, I am pumped about the reward feeling you're going to get when you actually pull off making this piece of gear that's just a phenomenal piece of gear, right? That to me is what's exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, this is where the crafting orders really tie all of this stuff together, because it helps you find what you need and what you want to get done. And, it connects players that have the skill with players that have the resources. And I think everything about that sounds really cool. I hope that this works out, at a level that we're kind of expecting, and that obviously Blizzard's expecting. They obviously have high hopes for the system. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so front and center for this new stuff. And I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of possibility here for the future of this game, and the way we kind of approach what we're doing inside of it, how we play cooperatively together, and how that results in powering up characters the way that we want to, and having cool, desirable items. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for it. So I like pretty much everything that they're talking about here. I mean, you obviously don't want it to be like super easy for somebody to just be able to craft mythic grade level gear, right? Like that's not good, because that diminishes the achievements of people who are killing high level bosses. Just the logistical hurdles of having a roster together that can do that, and sort of the luck chance of the item actually appearing and going to your character. Like, those are all significant factors. And being able to do this just with stuff you can gather in the game and obtain through quest rewards and stuff, like, yeah, the bar is going to have to be a lot higher there for you to make gear that's that item level and that's at that quality. But it's there. I mean, this is an option that would never have really been thinkable in previous eras of the game.
There we go. Sorry about that. Weird. That was a weird pause. That was, I was, we have a huge storm coming through, so I've been muting myself during the thunder clashes that have been happening. Yeah, so what's really exciting about this to me is the fact that we are creating a system for players whose reason to play the game could be crafting stuff, right? Like, we're actually hitting that point where I know people out there who we have them, as patrons in our Discord and whatnot, who literally live for that opening season big crafting rush that can happen, make as much gold as you can kind of like window. Whereas this will actually become more of a long-term profession as well. It's not just that hype period when something new comes out and item levels all go up and you can do a bunch of stuff. It's now also has a long-term goal, long-term objective, where you're actually able to go, you know what? I'm going to have my stable of characters who are the best crafters on the server, right? Who there's no one else out there who's doing what we do, kind of thing, right? And you can become known as that person. So when people are wanting to craft things, maybe you're the guy who they specify the name for. So they always want this particular person to craft their gear for them. And you can become that artisan and become that, that blacksmith on your server that everyone goes to get their mythic chess pieces or whatever it is, right? Like, I love that concept of this not just being a system that's put in to supplement the other content, right? This becomes actually why some people might play the game. that might play the game to try and work with this system and just use this system on a regular basis, filling people's orders, gathering all of the crazy materials together, working with other crafters to craft these amazing pieces of gear. Like that could be something that actually becomes a reason to play the game for people. So it's exciting they're making the system broad enough to actually finally encompass that, and be sustainable enough to actually work throughout the expansion, as opposed to just being a initial thing for a couple of weeks and then you just dismiss, crafting instead. So yeah, I'm pumped about that overall. Okay. A few specific crafting details. Basically, powerful crafting equipment. Up to 5 of these crafted pieces can be equipped at once, with two-handed weapons counting as 2. So just keep that in mind. So if you're like, hey, you want to craft these extremely powerful things, you can craft 5 pieces. So that could, just keep that in mind. You can't wear an entirely crafted set of gear. All of them start at an item level range near normal raids, increasing with quality through optional reagents and whatnot, obviously all the way up until mythic item levels, as we talked about. All are soulbound, so you'll need to craft them yourself or have someone craft them for you through a crafting order. And that's another thing, just to re-emphasize again. You can have soulbound gear crafted for you through a crafting order for your character. So even though it's soulbound, if you put up a crafting order for it, you can then get that piece mailed to you, and when you take it out of your mail, it's bound to you. So pretty cool as far as that goes. Each piece of crafted equipment will require several types of soulbound reagents that you will need to earn to craft it and improve it further with optional reagents. So one type of reagent will come from various challenging activities, including raids, dungeons, PvP, and adventuring in some dangerous areas. In other words, they're going to make the hard pieces of gear require reagents that mean you need to go and play content that is challenging content. I like that some dangerous outdoor activities, that might mean that there's a zone or an area of the world where there's, a particular elite you need to kill, right? That might be what it ends up being, to try and get a particular reagent to do something. A second type of reagent will come from a series of quests that award you enough to craft one piece of equipment. That is also kind of a cool way to do it, is just go, you know what? Here's your crafting bundle for this piece of equipment. And you can do it that way. So, yeah, some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to prevent, like a bot farming of mats that then turned into mythic item level gear. That's good. That's something they need to be aware of and design the system to prevent encouraging that. So yeah, I think like that sounds the way they're describing it, it seems like it's about on par with what it should be, right? If the goal is to rival the best gear you can get from PvE or PvP in a certain time frame, then it should be a higher bar to clear to either craft or receive that crafted item than what we're used to. And it does kind of mean that like all these different types of content and things to do out in the world, they can kind of bend around the system as well, because they can seed challenging dangerous outdoor areas with cool stuff, and then you need to go deal with that in order to get what you want. Like I like these ideas. I think that this is, I think it's a good starting point. Like obviously if this works out and they continue to run with this system and expand it, like it's obviously going to result in a lot of changes over the years and stuff. But I like, sort of the starting point here of let's make crafting and professions a thing that we actually play in World of Warcraft, and is not just like a bar that we fill up while we AFK in town. It's kind of always been like that. So this is a big shift away, and I think they have some cool ideas wrapped up in this rework for sure. I wasn't when they did the expansion reveal back in April, I was like, okay, yeah, professions, you do a profession revamp every expansion, it always ends up being the same thing. It never ends up being a key element of gameplay. It ends up being, at worst, like an obnoxious grind, and at best sort of an afterthought once you have your consumables set up and everything. So this definitely seems a lot different. I mean, this post is very in-depth for something that's not even in public testing yet. So I'll really be interested to see how this feels and sort of how people are reacting to it as public testing starts to open up and sort of they go with it. I mean, there are going to be pain points here, and it's hard to identify them without being able to play it. There's certainly going to be pain points, and the question inevitably for me becomes like, how does Blizzard react to the pain points that players identify? Because the last public testing cycle for an expansion, they didn't react to them. And, how when we run into the conduit energy of the profession system, like what kind of conversations are they going to have with us and how willing are they going to be to flex on it? Those are questions for another time. But, I think they're starting off on a good foot here. I want to get into this. I want to skill up my character's blacksmithing and be able to make cool armor and weapons and make high quality pieces at high skill and, use them and send them to my other tunes and sell them and hook guildies up with them. Like, all that sounds really cool to me. I want to do this. So this blog post kind of turned it really around for me in a big way. Not that I mean, what they showed in April, I thought seemed cool, but we just didn't get a lot of details on it, like kind of what the goals were or sort of what they were talking about. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of terminology in this blog post that they sort of glossed over in the reveal. So it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but I'm starting to think like, in the absence of sort of an expansion feature, an artifact weapon, a Heart of Azeroth and Azerite armor, a Covenant. I feel like having stuff that's intrinsic to your character, like a really flexible talent system and a really broad and robust crafting system with a high ceiling, these are building blocks for the future of the game, in my opinion. Like, I can see how this stuff works together and you can build on it for years to come.
Yeah. It's definitely the building on for years to come is super exciting, but I love that this becomes a way for someone to play the game. Like, I know people who just love gathering. That's just what they enjoy doing with the game. They find it very meditative to be able to go out and just sort of zone out and do their own thing. I know people who do that with fishing. I know people who do that with, a lot of different aspects of the game. It's neat that crafting is kind of finding its own realm. And I think that's great that it's finally getting fleshed out the way it needs to be. And like you said, easy to add on to, easy to develop and carry from expansion to expansion. A system that we essentially aren't going to just lose after one expansion would be amazing. So very pleased to see that.
Yeah, something that really feels like it's part of your character. It's part of your character's identity. It's who your character is that they do this and they do it at this skill level or whatever. I think that's a really good direction to move in away from stuff that we've sort of engaged heavily with and then put down and never had again.
Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned earlier were files, and files are a new sort of potion that's going to be craftable by alchemists. Similar to flasks, it lasts through death and counting as both as a battle and guardian elixir. The main difference is they tend to require about half the reagents to craft a file, and they last half as long, but two can be drunk together to get the duration of a flask for extra flexibility. So basically they work the same way as flasks in the sense that when you drink one, there's a certain capped amount of duration that it's allowed to have. And so if you're halfway through drinking a flask and you drink halfway through a flask duration, you drink another flask, it will bring you back up towards that cap again. Basically taking to that, hour and 15 minutes or 2 hours and 15-minute mark as opposed to just 2 hours. In this case, obviously you can drink two of them and it sort of stack up. They've changed what that cap is for how long it lasts. And this sort of creates a lot more flexibility. So a wide variety of files can be discovered, each with their own unique uses, and you will not find a cauldron for files in Dragon Isles, but you will find one of the most powerful crafted potions. And so that's interesting to me, whether or not, you're going to be dropping cauldrons for flasks for your whole raid, or whether or not you actually are going to have that one person who specialized in files and is able to essentially craft these things for your group, and you want them to craft all the ones for your group. And they're pumping out work orders for them and making a bunch of gold off them because it's crafting this incredibly powerful potion. I'm curious as to what this incredibly powerful potion is. My inkling / curiousness of this is whether the incredibly powerful potion is one that prevents death once. That's what I'm curious about. Whether the first time you go to zero health, whether it snaps your health back up. That would be a very powerful, cool file if that was a thing. But,
yeah, I mean, I have a feeling that this is going to be, shall we say, controversial. This is kind of a big change, like in the world of, consumables and stuff, is like traditional flasks as we have known them for many years, essentially going away. I'm okay with it because I think flasks have been pretty boring and sort of unnecessarily expensive to kind of either create or to purchase, especially on a dead realm like mine. I mean, it won't, that'll be changing in 927, but I mean, there have been times this expansion where I had to look at it and go, I am not going to buy flasks off the auction house this week because they're 1,000 gold a piece. Like, this is ridiculous. The examples they give, there's some screenshots of like kind of, I don't know if they're like mocked up tool tips for different files or what. I mean, obviously the stuff is in development, but it's stuff like remaining stationary will increase your intellect up to 240 over 5 seconds. Movement consumes the effect, granting up to 500 speed for 5 seconds. That's a much cooler effect on a consumable than main stat, And those main stat flasks get less cool every tier as your stats inflate, and the consumables stay the same. They get less impactful over time. There have been times where they've added new consumables in, but when they don't do that, like, your flask is just straight up worse when you move to a new difficulty tier, new season, right? So these that are more interactive or have some more gameplay, or like grant a whole bunch of secondary, or grant like a ridiculous amount of primary under certain circumstances. I like the gameplay potential there. I'm wondering how controversial this is going to be to players and to alchemists who are used to having that steady stream of income from making flasks or whatever. I mean, you're still going to want to run files. Like, these are big benefits that you're going to want your character to have when you're in any kind of difficult content, in combat. But it's not, it seems like they're moving away from just like, you have, a buff to your amount of main stat for this much time. Thanks. I think it's exciting. To me, it's exciting. I'm pretty bored with flasks as we know them right now. And I'm always up for, these types of effects that at least attempt to introduce gameplay, interactivity, counterplay, decision-making, stuff like that. If it doesn't work, they can always go back to main stat flasks, but I'm intrigued that as part of this whole rework that we're changing up, kind of fundamental assumptions about what we do with consumables and how they work.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be the controversy in my realm, in the mythic rating realm, around all of this, around the crafted gear, around everything of, we are a community that wants the best, wants to wear the best, always uses the best for everything that we do. And so making that have a barrier of time commitment / complexity to be able to actually accomplish that is something that's always going to raise a lot of eyebrows about, oh my goodness, like, the millions of gold that are spent on the race, if you will, already. How much more is that going to increase this? Because we're going to have to be doing all these work orders over and over and over again to try and get enough potions and flasks and gear and whatnot for our team. That is always going to raise it, but it's just emphasizing that that's a very small, I just try and keep in mind, it's a very small aspect of the player base, and for the greater player base, I think these are very exciting and interesting changes that are coming to crafting in general, so I'm pumped about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be meta choices too, right? There's going to be things that are just like, okay, on this fight, I mean, part of what they say here is like, they're shorter duration and they require fewer mats because they want you to use them more situationally, which makes sense. I just don't know how effective that's really going to be. Like, for me, as for tanking, right, they show an example of one that just gives you a bunch of versatility. Is there going to be a reason why I want to use something else over that? Like, maybe, but that seems really niche. But, when they do fights that maybe have weirder aspects where you need like a burst of movement to react to this ability, then something like that, the file that gives you a stacking buff when you stand still and then it consumes it and gives you movement speed, like, that might be really good for certain fights. So yeah, I mean, I guess the question becomes, how economically viable is it to drink 16 of those in a raid night or whatever? But we'll get there. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to me, what's exciting about it is, thinking back to Legion, there was a potion that I think it was Avalanche Potion, where basically when you drank it, you became a boulder and slammed into the ground, as opposed to taking fall damage. So if you jumped and were falling, you could drink this potion. It would prevent you from taking fall damage, and you do a bunch of damage to stuff around you. And I always wished things like that were more viable or had content designed around them, right? Like, oh, well, we have this potion, let's design a fight where drinking an avalanche potion is a benefit to you to actually be able to do that, right? This boss knocks everyone up into the air, and so you either have to like organize slow falls or displacements to sort of not take fall damage or leaps or charges or whatnot, or you can have your raid drink an avalanche potion and just smash the boss as they all collapse down together in this giant, avalanche on top of the boss. That would have been really cool, right? But they never designed something like that. And so I think it'd be neat if this opens more doors for things like that happening. I think it'd be kind of cool to see what could happen. Okay, a couple more things I just want to cover quickly on the show. First and foremost, for those of you who are out there and interested, the Hunter and Rogue Dragonflight Talon trees are now up in preview. So you can head on over and check to see which combinations of abilities and whatnot are available for your character, if that's something you want to play with. I'm sure Wowhead already has their talent calculator up for these classes, and you can start, sort of sifting through and seeing all the fun stuff there. Some things to note, some previously spec-specific abilities that were moved into the core talent trees, such as Serpent Sting, Explosive Shot, while others like Wailing Arrow and Ral Shalar's Sylvanas' Legendary Bow, Fury of the Eagle, and Survival Hunter's artifact weapon, Talon Claw, are making more permanent appearances in specific talent trees. So if those are things you're looking forward to as a hunter, they're coming back. And then as far as Rogue goes, there are a ton of...
Wailing Arrow being like a talent, that's awesome. Like Wailing Arrow, to be able to use that situationally all the time, regardless of what gear you're wearing, that would be awesome for dungeon groups and stuff. Like, very, very cool utility choice there.
Yeah. And then there are tons of combinations of abilities and effects that were previously not possible with Rogue, both by making some former spec-only abilities available to all rogues in the core class talent tree, and by providing more opportunity for specializations within a given rogue spec. To that end, there are many familiar current and historic rogue abilities and effects returning as options as well. So sources from former talent trees, legendaries, conduits, Azerite, and more. I'm hearing rumblings from a lot of the Mythic community around how they're coming up with some of these talent trees, because right now, which abilities become part of the base kit and which ones become part of the specialization tree is seeming not consistent between classes. There isn't a template, if you will, that's happening right now with these talent trees. There isn't, okay, the interrupt that you spec into is always in your base talent tree, and it's always on the left side, and it always takes this many points to get to. They aren't doing that with these talent trees, and that's raising a lot of eyebrows around how they're even coming up with these talent trees. So I think there's going to be a lot of feedback once we see like an alpha or something go live and people start playing with this kind of stuff. I think there's going to be a lot of feedback around, you guys need to standardize this better, because I think right now, as much as it's cool to see a lot of these abilities coming back, a lot of these talent trees force players to go so far down a certain path to get something that felt like it was essential, or that essential thing was moved out of their base kit into a specialization tree, and that is feeling weird for a lot of these classes. So just a reminder to everyone, we haven't even seen alpha yet. So there's still alpha, there's still beta, there's still a lot of changing points. The important thing is start taking notes about the things you're seeing you're concerned about, and start making posts explaining what you're concerned about and why. Because that's that is really what's gonna affect how these talent trees play out. I do find it odd that it does seem like the team that's designing these talent trees isn't working off of some sort of baseline of, okay, what are the interrupts this class has? Those should all fall into the class specific tree, not the specialization tree, and they should all be this far into the tree. Like, that to me would make sense to a certain degree for a lot of these. It just seems odd that they didn't go that route. There's a lot of these trees that are just really unique, as if individual class designers are all individually, without necessarily communicating how they're deciding to divvy up the trees, or creating talent trees.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree that's okay, especially when you're kind of far out from locking stuff in, which we still are, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to do what is cool for the class and for the individual specs, and just try to make something that feels cool and fun, and then you can dial some of this stuff in later. I think the good thing about the way the talent system works is it's not detached from your character in any way. It's not like, oh, well, these talents are messed up and they changed them, and now I have to, I have to go switch covenants, or I have to go get some different gear and then get some artifact power, and then I have to do something differently. It's like you just have the talent points from leveling up, and then you just, respec your tree out as things change or whatever, different builds emerge or what have you. So that, I think the big benefit here is they can be a lot more flexible with it. So if they have those weird outliers where it's like, oh, you know what, this class really doesn't have good interrupt coverage or dispel coverage, or the way these party and raid buffs are set up is not comparable to most of the other classes, then they can flex on that stuff presumably a lot more easily than they could with stuff like artifact traits or Azerite armor or anything related to covenants, conduits, etc. So and the impact to the player when stuff inevitably fluctuates is more or less negligible, right? You're just respecking your tree at that point. You don't have to go, farm up some resource or something, or I don't know, like acquire a new conduit or something like that. Like, you just rebuild your tree. So I think once testing is available and we start seeing more classes being implemented and talked about, and people are playing around with it and seeing what, how this actually feels in practice, then I expect we'll see a lot of the stuff change and probably continue to throughout most of Dragonflight's lifespan. Really, I don't see why you wouldn't, right? If you address like needs in that regard, the system seems flexible enough that should be a benefit, is that you can change stuff without really negatively impacting players.
Yeah, I can see them moving something that's, 12 points in to being 20 points in, and something that's 30 points in to being 10 points in. Like, I can see that happening throughout this balancing and tuning. So I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up down that road. All right, few notable hotfixes just to go over quickly. First and foremost is a pretty silly one. In the other side, Hakar the Soulflayer, they resolved an issue where Hakar could just leave his encounter area. Yeah, it's not intended. Just
sometimes I want
going on vacation.
Yeah, it's summertime. Hakar needs a break too. We've been killing him for a long time, looking for a lot of spattered scales. So,
that's right.
Hakar does need a break, but he's not supposed to just disappear in the middle of the fight. So.
Exactly. In Tazavesh, Soleil's Gambit, basically wandering pulsars summoned by Adorn Starseers can no longer be bolstered. Well, that's nice. Whenever they change something to not being affected by that stuff, great. Thank you.
I mean, those things are actually kind of nasty. They're the little ads that the Starseers shoot out, and they start like exploding and doing like ramping AoE damage.
Yeah.
You really don't want to bolster those. So now you can't. So that's good, because those things are pretty scary on 4 weeks, man. They hurt.
Yeah. Players who are friendly with the Enlightened can now purchase a pouch of Prodigious Wonders. This item is sold by Quartermaster Vilo in Zareth Mortis for 1,500 Cosmic Flux, and it allows you to transfer 1,250 Cosmic Flux per pouch to any character on your account. In other words, you can now move Cosmic Flux around. Huzzah!
This is so good.
Yeah.
This just came out of nowhere, I feel like, last week. I think it just got hotfixed in on Thursday or Friday, and it was just like, yeah, you can do this now.
Yeah.
Probably a little overdue in most reckoning, just because, like, we're so far into this now. It's how many people have just kind of hung it up for the season anyway at this point, but it'll be there. The cool thing is it'll be there right at the start of season 4. So if you're spinning back up, playing some different characters or whatever, if you need some flux to use the catalyst, create some top rank legendaries, if you have a stack of it on another character, now you can move it around at a pretty light premium. It doesn't feel too bad, I think, to get 1,250 for investing 1,500. So this is a great change. This is really one of the last things that I can think of where it's like, okay, well, this is kind of inflexible and there's no answer here except to put time into a different character.
Yeah. And then last but not least on this episode, we were talking about the Great Push at the top of the show. Yes, the Great Push Season 4 is coming. It's happening. Signups are now open through August 5th. There's a $210,000 prize pool that they're currently looking at doing. The Proving Grounds are going to kick off on August 10th. So this is like Season 4 starts, and then that weekend is when it closes the signups. So you have to sign up before Season 4 starts. And then the Proving Grounds kick off the weekend after, the following week after the season kicks off. And it's going to be it's going to be going, man. Like that they are not waiting around. This is happening immediately. upon all of this starting. And I almost feel like those first few proving ground weekends would almost be really cool to watch because people are trying to figure out the season dungeons. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, we're not going to have a lot of practice time with them. Also, if you can do some proving ground dungeons on +15, you can get a banner for your trouble. So
yeah,
even if you're not really looking to compete, you can hop in there and look at doing that, even if you don't think you have a shot at like top 6 in your region or whatever. So that's kind of cool. I love the Great Push format. I think it is the superior MDI format because it's really about like your overall mastery of the dungeon pool, as it exists, and sort of as we, it's more kind of the way we play at home to get, Mythic Plus rating and stuff like that. You don't have this sort of artificial foot race between two teams that aren't interacting with each other. It's just all about who can use their time wisely, who can execute at a really high level, who can do the hardest dungeons in the format. I like that so much better. To me, that really exemplifies like what's cool about the Keystone Dungeon system to begin with. And I mean, we spent a lot of TSE air over the years, not as much lately as we used to, but complaining about the format of MDI. And I prefer Great Push. Plus, since it's not like a mainline WoW esport, this will be on Twitch as well as YouTube, which is a lot of people's preferred platform for watching esports. So that's really cool. Yeah, this will be really interesting, I think, with just the wacky dungeon pool for season 4 and also kind of what's possible with gear, right? Like you'll see like really cool mixed up loadouts that never would have made sense or been possible earlier in this expansion with all the faded items and stuff. So I think this will be a pretty interesting watch, and I don't know about the timing on that. Is this the last Shadowlands esport we're going to see? It might end up being. I can't remember. I think AWC is the next 2 weekends, right? And then this is like 2 weeks after that. So at that point, I think we're probably done. We're sending Shadowlands out with a bang with this one, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be another PvP event or not. They haven't talked about it yet, so we'd have to see if there's an accelerated PvP thing that they're doing or not. Yeah, the format for this being available on Twitch again, as you said, is the preferred viewing experience for a lot of people when they want to watch esports. I watched a good chunk of the Apex Legends tournament that happened this past weekend. Their global finals. And they use something called Command Center on Twitch, which apparently is a thing, which I know Overwatch used for a little bit. I'm hoping that the WoW scene can get into using a tool like this a little bit more. Basically, it has a selection of streams across the bottom with one main stream you're watching. And so the main stream you're watching is the like casted version of the stream that you're able to watch. And then all of these selections across the bottom are different players' perspectives. So you can essentially click through each of the different player perspectives to watch what, the person you want to watch is doing or the team you're wanting to watch is doing. I think would be really, really, really neat for this stuff. It's been something that in the esports scene has been evolving over the last 5 or 6 years and has come to be pretty prominent. And so I want Blizzard to sort of get on board with using tools like this more often. And I think the WoW esports scene could really benefit from you being able to choose a player's perspective to watch from, as opposed to always being something guided. It's often much more difficult to understand what's happening in World of Warcraft inside any kind of competitive scene when you're seeing 3 or 4 or 5 characters all doing something, and inside the case of a lot of MDI situations, 10, because you're seeing 2 teams at the same time in a split screen. And be able to keep track of what's happening. Whereas it can often be a lot more fun to sort of zoom in on one particular player, the player who's playing the class or spec that you like, or is the player who you're cheering for, and watch what they're doing and the decisions they're making. So you could also hear, when you went through them, the comms for that group, which I thought was also really neat. So you could hear the team talking whenever you wanted to, as opposed to the casters deciding, hey, let's listen in on what's happening with this, and then going quiet for a period and turning up the volume on what the players are saying. You could just choose to listen to the players the entire time and actually hear their conversations, which I think was very cool. So I want more of that. If they're going to keep doing esports, I want them to do esports really well and keep evolving. So I'm excited for that.
That would be cool. You got to wonder if like WoW is set up to allow stuff to hook into it like that, though. Like that might be a huge challenge. But I mean, to your point somewhat, this is kind of why I like Great Push better, because a lot of times on broadcast you just focus on one team who's doing something really particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas in the traditional MDI, you're just constantly watching that two-team foot race. And again, they're not interacting with each other. They're not actually racing against each other. They're each just racing against the clock. And it can be really hard to read, anything of value at times during those traditional MDI broadcasts. Great Push is a little bit easier to read. The stakes are a little bit easier to understand. So I like the format. I kind of wish it was just the only way that they did PvE esports, really.
Yeah. Okay. With that, we're going to play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. That's right. We have a Patreon over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. So if you're someone who wants to hop in and support the show, feel free to check out our Patreon. And we have no new patrons this week, but we are still planning out our July events for our patron Q&A episode that we like to do. That's going to be later this month. And hopefully we'll have something Alpha/Dragonflight related to talk about at that. That should be happening at some point soon because they're running out of time to do things like this. So I'm hoping that they just,
one would think. I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of Dragonflight talk for the July patron show, or maybe season 4 talk. I don't know.
Maybe season 4 talk because it's the end of the season, so it's possible.
Yeah, we are. We keep it pretty grounded in the show as to like what we're playing most of the time. I mean, it's kind of hard right now because the Shadowlands is done. There's like season 4 is going to roll out. They're going to tweak it here and there, but it's not like some amazing, exciting new thing is going to happen in Shadowlands. Like they have moved on essentially. So it's kind of hard to stay totally grounded in it right now when we do a show like this, where we're kind of recapping what people are talking about around the game and what Blizzard's telling us. But this is really where a lot of our listeners and patrons live along with us. So sometimes, we kind of expect that people are going to be looking ahead and we just talk about, minutia of stuff that we're doing in the game right now, which is fine. I love doing that stuff. That's why we do the show the way it is to begin with. And it's always great to do the patron shows. And it's thank you all for the support that allows us to keep doing bonus content and throwing up so many extra shows in the feed. And we'll get. It's not going to be this week, but at some point between now and probably the 29th, we'll get something on the calendar for you. Yeah,
exactly. All right, folks, if you've enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, leave us that 5-star review. They really help out our show and boost us up those charts. And we always love reading them here. We don't have one to read right now, which means if you leave one, we'll read it on the next episode, which is pretty exciting. So get over there and leave us a 5-star. We want to read them out here. All right. That wraps up episode 529 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave a comment on the show, you can go over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. It's also where all the notes are from this episode if you want to find links to the things we talked about. And if you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter, or you can join our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/discord, and you can have a chat with us in there too, which is great. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. You can check out all the sweet designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that fun stuff. And if you're trying to find Jason, where can you find Jason?
Best place to find me is always over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, always talking whatever I'm getting into around WoW and other stuff. And you can find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald. I think I am back on schedule at this point. So Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Sundays doing raid streams, Keystone Dungeons, and then kind of hanging out for a bit after that. So check out twitch.tv/Shieldwald for that. And maybe starting up Monday evening streams again pretty soon, which will just be more kind of chill, hangout, solo gameplay. So check out the channel over there.
Yeah, if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. I've been streaming our raids whenever we were doing them. I don't think I'm in raiding tonight or tomorrow night. I think I'm taking both those off for other commitments, but I'll be back doing it again on Thursday or on Monday or whenever we are going at it again. So you'll see me around. I also sometimes do some streams on Friday nights with some friends So if you folks are looking for me, you can find me over there, twitch.tv/SpencerHD. All right, with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and job's done.